In this session, I'm going to talk about and reveal what the different variables in the formula represent. As you can see over there, I've written the different formulas. As you can also see, sometimes I got a plus Q and a plus C. Remember, these are variables. You can substitute any variable. It just represents a value. So that's the first thing. The next thing I want to mention is in grade 10, we basically use this formula. And the extent in grade 10 is that the graph will always turn, the turning point will always be on the y-axis. In grade 11 and 12, we move on to these other formulas where the graph can shift left, right, up, down. If you look at all the formulas, every single one of them have a value of A. Now, what is A? A determines the shape of the parabola. But more specifically, there's a specific name. It's called the vertical stretch factor. And what's the vertical stretch factor? The vertical stretch factor says if the greater the value of A, the closer the arms are to the y-axis. The smaller the value of A, the further away the arms are from the y-axis. More than that, if A is greater than 0, we say that the parabola is a happy face. If A is less than 0, we say the parabola is a sad face. Upside down. If A is greater than 0, then the turning point has a minimum value. If A is less than 0, then the turning point has a maximum value. So let me explain that. So if A is greater than 0, we know that it's a happy face. That means the turning point can only be at the bottom. Therefore, the turning point is a minimum. If A is a negative number or less than 0, then it's a sad face, which means the turning point is at the top. Therefore, the turning point has a maximum. In each of the variables except for this one over here. So this one we're going to exclude for now. You'll have a value of Q or C. So let me just put here. Q is equal to C. It determines how the graph shifts up and down along the y-axis. This means that if Q or C is greater than 0, the graph will shift up. If Q or C is less than 0, the graph will shift down. So let me explain. So if this is the mother graph, y is on 0. If we increase it or make it, the value positive, the graph will shift up. If the value is negative, the graph will shift down. Now it doesn't matter if it's happy face or sad face. If the value of Q or C increases, it shifts up. And if the value of Q or C decreases, it shifts down. What is P? P represents the shift left or right. So if P is greater than 0, then the shift will be to the left. If P is less than 0, then the shift will be to the right. And we're going to talk about this more. We're going to delve into it. But typically what I'm saying is if this is the mother graph and P is positive, the graph will shift that way. If P is negative, the graph will shift this way. And it doesn't matter if it's happy face or sad face, positive that way, negative that way. Then if we look in this formula here, there's a value called B. Now, B is nothing other than a variable, but B plays an important part when we talk about turning point. Finally, we get this equation where we got x1 and x2. And basically, that tells us exactly where it cuts the x-axis. This will be x1 and this will be x2. Now, what happens if we combine the A variable and the Q variable? And as you can see in there, point number 1, if A is positive, so it's a happy face, and Q is positive, then the graph will not have an x-intercept. So in other words, A is positive and Q is positive, that will never touch the x-axis. The opposite is also true. If a is less than 0 and q is negative, you're going to have exactly the same scenario, but just with an unhappy face, and we will never touch the x-axis. Next, let's have a look at domain and range. Domain, as you can see there, x is an element of real numbers, and x is an element of negative infinity to infinity. What does that mean? That means if we have a graph over here, it'll always go on for infinity, and it'll go on for infinity over there. So I talk about domains and ranges. I actually have a video on that specifically, but what you need to know is that it doesn't matter if it's up, if it's a happy face or a sad face, these values will just go on and on and on. And it is round brackets because it does not include, it never stops. It just continues and continues and continues. Let's have a look at the range. Y is the graph. If we look over there, Y is the graph. Q or C is where the turning point is. So if we're saying the graph is greater than or equal to the C value, so if this Y value is greater than equal to the C value, then we can write Y is an element of, and in square brackets because it's equal to, and then to infinity. So let's do this. So we know that A is a happy face. Therefore, the turning point is down over there. It's Y is greater than Q. Therefore, it'll equal and then go on for infinity. So in other words, it'll go on and on and on and on. Y will just go on to infinity. Where over here, it stops there. That's where it stops. That's where it equal to. So the square bracket is equal to where it stops and is equal to. Infinity represents this where it'll just go on and on. Inversely, if Y is less than equal to Q or C, and A is a sad face, so it's less than 0, then this will be the maximum. That is where it'll stop, which is represented by that square bracket, and then it'll just go for infinity down, down, down along Y, which represents the round bracket because it never touches, and it'll go to infinity. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, please drop your question in the questions below. We'll read and respond as soon as possible. If you need more help with math, please click the link below that goes to my channel and go view what we have available there.